When a Special Forces unit chooses a rifle, the internet often treats the choice like a verdict from the gods. That is the least useful way to read it. The G95K is interesting not because elite users make it mystical, but because elite adoption reveals a very specific kind of institutional problem. The cold question is not, is this the best rifle? The better question is, best for whom, under what requirements, and at what cost to the wider institution? Once you ask that, the G95K becomes less of a fetish object and more of a procurement document. The German case matters because it sits between several pressures at once: national industry, Bundeswehr modernization, special operations requirements, alliance compatibility, the legacy of the G36 controversy, and the broader pool of the 416 Hong Kong dollars family across Western forces. That does not make the G95K a universal answer. It makes it a useful signal. Signals are dangerous if you read too much into them. A special forces acquisition can point toward a trend, but it does not automatically define what a whole army needs. Elite units often have different budgets, training time, maintenance support, mission profiles, and tolerance for complexity. A rifle that makes sense there may be too expensive, too specialized, or simply unnecessary elsewhere. That is the first lesson of the G95K: elite adoption is evidence, not magic. The system known as the G95K is associated with Heckler & Koch's HK for 16A7 family and German special operations use. The details matter historically because the 416 Hong Kong dollars line itself represents a modern answer to an older Western rifle ecosystem. It keeps enough of the AR pattern grammar to feel familiar across many users, while introducing a different engineering approach and a very German procurement context. But the purpose here is not to walk through operation or equipment arrangement. We are staying at the level that matters for history: why a country chooses a platform, what that choice says about institutions, and why a niche decision should not be mistaken for a universal law. If you want that kind of weapons context instead of Special Forces mythology, subscribe after this point. The channel follows adoption, doctrine, and engineering trade-offs, not tactical fantasy. Start with Germany's institutional memory. The G36 had been the standard German service rifle for decades and became politically controversial after public disputes over performance, expectations, and procurement confidence. Whether one treats every accusation as fair or exaggerated, the important fact is that trust was damaged. Once trust is damaged, the next rifle is not only a rifle. It is a reputational repair project. That kind of repair is difficult because it has to satisfy two audiences. The first audience is practical: soldiers, armorers, trainers, and planners who need a tool that fits their work. The second audience is political: ministries, committees, journalists, and taxpayers who remember the last controversy and want proof that lessons were learned. A special operations rifle can be judged by both audiences at once, even when only one of them will ever carry it. This double audience changes the tone of the decision. Inside the unit, the question is capability and confidence. Outside the unit, the question is trust. The public may not understand every technical requirement, but it understands the embarrassment of a disputed rifle program. That means the next choice must not only function, it must be defensible. A procurement file becomes part of the weapon's public armor. Special operations procurement sits inside that atmosphere. A unit like KSK or Naval Special Operations does not select equipment for symbolism alone, but the symbolism is still there. A modern rifle from a domestic manufacturer can signal seriousness, responsiveness, and technical confidence. It says the institution is not ignoring the last controversy. It also says that elite requirements deserve a tailored answer. That tailoring is the interesting part. Elite users may value compactness, suppressed use, accessory integration, durability under demanding schedules, compatibility with allied practices, and confidence in a mature manufacturer. Those are broad institutional categories, not practical fitting advice. The point is that the requirements are dense. They are not simply a normal rifle, but cooler. The G95K also shows how modern weapons are evaluated as systems. The rifle itself is one object, but the real package includes optics, lights, aiming devices, training standards, spare parts, armorers, transport cases, manuals, and alliance familiarity. That ecosystem is why a modern rifle can look less revolutionary than its procurement significance. The change is not always in the silhouette. Sometimes the change is in the support structure. That is especially true for a platform connected to the 416 Hong Kong dollars family. To a casual viewer, the outline can feel familiar because it belongs to the broad AR pattern visual universe. To an institution, the question is narrower: what manufacturer support exists, what parts pipeline exists, what tests were run, how well does it fit existing training assumptions, and what risks remain compared with the alternatives? Modernity is not a vibe. It is an audited relationship between object and system. The Special Operations label can hide that bureaucracy, but it does not remove it. Elite units still need contracts, sustainment, inspections, accountable inventories, and training continuity. The myth says the unit simply chooses the best object. The institution says the object must survive paperwork, budgets, delivery schedules, political scrutiny, and the ordinary friction of keeping equipment alive after the camera leaves. There is a temptation to say, if Special Forces chose it, everyone should want it. That is bad history. Special Forces are not a showroom for civilian desire or a shortcut for General Army doctrine. They are a narrow instrument. Their equipment reflects mission density, not universal truth. A small unit can absorb cost and complexity that a mass army cannot. A mass army must worry about recruit training, national budgets, conscript or volunteer turnover, depot scale, and political audit. Put differently, an elite rifle can be a precision tool, while a general service rifle is a public administration problem made of metal. If you think elite adoption should influence general infantry procurement more than it does, put the argument in the comments. The useful version is not they know best. It is what part of their requirement genuinely scales to the wider army. Germany's broader rifle replacement story reinforces that distinction. The path away from the G36 involved legal disputes, competing manufacturers, shifting decisions, and public scrutiny. That is procurement reality. A military rifle is not chosen by a single clean test in a heroic laboratory. It moves through tenders, objections, specifications, politics, budgets, and institutional embarrassment. The G95K's Special Forces role is one chapter in that larger story, not the whole book. This is why the German case is more interesting than a simple new rifle headline. The same country can make one decision for special operations and another, slower decision for the general force. Those decisions may share technology, manufacturer relationships, and lessons, but they do not carry the same scale. A few thousand specialized rifles and a national service rifle replacement are different procurement animals. The 416 Hong Kong dollars family had already gained credibility through use by various Western military and police units. That background matters because no army wants to be the only one holding an unproven answer when the stakes are high. Adoption elsewhere can reduce perceived risk. It creates a sense that the platform has a support ecosystem beyond one buyer. Again, this is not proof of perfection. It is proof of confidence. Confidence can be rational and still limited. The G95K may be a sound answer for German special operations, but the channel's job is to resist turning that into propaganda. A procurement choice can be good and still narrow. It can be modern and still expensive. It can be elite and still irrelevant to many ordinary military roles. Mature analysis keeps all three thoughts in the same room. The design trade-off here is partly about familiarity versus improvement. A rifle related to the AR pattern world can communicate with a large body of training and accessory culture, but a manufacturer can still alter the engineering and ergonomics to match its own solution. That makes it attractive in alliance environments where familiarity matters. It also creates debate, because every departure from the familiar baseline must justify itself. For Germany, that balance has another layer: domestic industrial confidence. Heckler & Koch is not just a logo on a receiver. It is part of Germany's post-war small arms identity, export reputation, and defense industrial base. Choosing a German manufacturer can simplify some political arguments and complicate others. It can look like national competence, but it can also intensify scrutiny when problems appear. The G95K exists inside that national story. For special units, the justification may be easier. They often have the training depth to exploit a more refined package and the logistical support to maintain it. For a whole army, the same refinement may become a burden. This is the difference between a high-performance tool and a national standard. The G95K belongs to the first conversation before it belongs to the second. The visual culture around special forces makes this harder. Photographs of compact rifles, masked operators, and clean equipment create a fantasy of competence. Viewers see the object and import authority into it. But authority actually belongs to the system, selection, training, planning, intelligence, logistics, discipline, and mission design. The rifle is part of that system, not the source of it. That fantasy can distort procurement lessons. Viewers may ask what the unit carries and skip the question of why the unit can carry it. Elite forces can demand more from equipment because they often demand more from everything around the equipment. They may receive more intensive training, tighter maintenance, better support, and more careful mission planning. Copying the object without copying the ecosystem is not analysis. It is costume. If that distinction cuts through the mythology, leave a like. It helps this kind of sober military history compete with gear worship. The G95K's real legacy may be as a marker of German modernization. It shows a Bundeswehr trying to move past a damaged rifle debate, special units receiving a tailored tool, and a domestic manufacturer remaining central to national procurement. It also shows the limits of what a single object can prove. A rifle adopted by elite units says something about those units. It does not automatically solve the problems of an entire army. That limited proof is still valuable. Special forces can reveal where an institution wants to go before the rest of the force can afford to follow. They can test ideas, expose weaknesses, normalize features, and create political confidence. But they can also hide cost and complexity because their scale is smaller. A serious reading of the G95K has to see both sides of that laboratory role. This is the middle turn of the story. The more elite the user, the less universal the lesson may be. That sounds backward, but it is often true. Elite use is informative because it pushes equipment hard. It is misleading because it happens in abnormal conditions. The analyst has to hold both truths at once. So what should we take from the G95K? Not that it is a magic rifle. Not that it should define everyone's taste. Not that special forces choices are fake either. The lesson is more precise. Modern adoption is about requirement fit. A platform wins when it matches a specific institution's constraints better than the alternatives it is actually willing to fund, train and support. The G95K matched a narrow German requirement at a particular time. It carried the credibility of the 416 Hong Kong dollars family, the political value of domestic industry, and the practical value of a mature modern ecosystem. That is a serious story, even without mythology. The phrase, "at a particular time," matters. Procurement is never timeless. A rifle chosen after a controversy answers the controversy as well as the tactical requirement. A rifle chosen by special units answers their mission profile as well as the national story around modernization. A rifle chosen from a familiar manufacturer answers questions of trust, supply, and accountability. Those answers may remain valid for years, but they are still answers to a moment. In the end, the best way to respect elite equipment is to stop romanticizing it. Treat it as evidence. Ask what pressure produced it, what trade-offs it accepted, and what part of the answer remains trapped inside the special unit that chose it. That is why the G95K belongs on Arsenal context. Not as a poster object, but as a case study in how modern militaries make narrow choices under public scrutiny. The rifle tells us about Germany, procurement confidence, special operations requirements and the limits of copying elite decisions into general doctrine. In that sense, the most mature response to the G95K is neither envy nor dismissal. It is translation. Translate the choice into requirements, then translate the requirements into institutional context. What did Germany need from a special operations rifle? What did it need from its own defense industry? What did it need to signal after the G36 debate? What does a small elite adoption prove, and what does it leave unanswered? The answer is a narrow but valuable lesson. The G95K shows how a modern military can use elite procurement to solve a real requirement, rebuild confidence and test a direction without pretending that every soldier needs the same answer tomorrow. It is a serious rifle story precisely because it refuses the easy fantasy. Special forces choices are meaningful, but meaning is not the same as universality. Elite adoption can reveal the future, but it can also exaggerate a niche. The G95K sits exactly on that line. That line is where the analysis should end. Treat the rifle as a signal, not a shrine. It signals German confidence in a domestic manufacturer, a desire to move past an older controversy, and the reality that special operations can move faster than a whole army. But it also signals caution. The more specific the requirement, the more carefully we should translate the lesson before applying it elsewhere. The G95K is therefore not a shortcut to an answer. It is a disciplined question about fit, scale and institutional trust. That makes it more useful than a myth, because myths flatten choices and this rifle exposes them. That is exactly what a serious adoption story should do. It turns fascination back into context.